when you're on a CNN website and you see an ad that you don't really, necessarily think a lot about, that is the winner. That ad that you see is the winner of a competitive process that potentially thousands of Yang's customers have competed digitally to get that spot. And through a variety of wizardry, that particular ad has won the competition for that moment in time.
Some people, not myself, but many people like to go shopping. It's almost like entertainment for them. They go out and they encounter things, and that's interesting to them. Let's see if there's some interesting things that I might want to buy. If I could had an opportunity to do that, and there were good things offered to me, I would invest time in doing that. Otherwise, I just don't like shopping because it's a waste of time, and it's not very. I rarely find something new that I would like to use.
Welcome to the Darby Mills series, Intrepid Pioneers of the Next Economy, featuring discussions with entrepreneurs at the forefront of deploying machine intelligence and brainstorming sessions about where the technology may go.
Okay, welcome to the Darby Mills series, Intrepid Pioneers of the Next Economy. I'm Ajay Agrawal, co-founder of Intrepid Growth Partners, and I'm here with my three collaborators, all of whom are senior advisors at Intrepid. Rich Sutton, who pioneered reinforcement learning and recently is a recipient of the Turing Award. Sendhil, who's a professor at MIT. And Niamh Gavin, who's an applied AI scientist and CEO of Emergent Platforms. The domain we're exploring in this episode is digital advertising. We're here with the CTO of StackAdapt, which is a fast-growing Toronto-based company that's using AI to optimize digital ad campaigns across multiple channels. Intrepid is a proud investor in StackAdapt. And so, Yang, let's get started and we'll talk about StackAdapt.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to meet everyone. Yeah, I look forward to the discussion.
And so, Yang, I know that you use various different applications of machine intelligence for lots of different things inside of StackAdapt, and so we've just really picked one to focus on. And at a very high level, this is a matching problem. Matching between, on the one hand, advertisers who want to communicate to potential customers attributes of their product, and on the other hand, people who need stuff. And so all of this happens across a variety of channels at very high speed. And this matching problem involves sort of multiple levels of decision making from the brand, like you can think of a brand like McDonald's or Coca-Cola or something, and the people that manage their advertising, and then the platforms of websites and TV and so on. And so, Yang, if you could just give a description and just sort of pick something very simple so listeners to the podcast who don't have any background in the field can kind of just create a picture in their mind of a brand that wants to advertise and how it works on your platform.
Yeah, definitely. So in the advertising and marketing ecosystem, there's all these different channels, from your traditional banner displays to video, connected TV, mobile, audio. And as a company, we're going into marketing channels such as email. So there's all these signals that arrive and various opportunities in which we could match a user to the right problem or product and the right content. The scale of this, our company alone looks at close to 10 million opportunities every single second. And so there's massive amounts of data. Now, the downside of this is that these data points we get in order to determine a match, they're not necessarily deterministic data in which we may not know exactly who a person is. We have to guess. And this is very different from an ecosystem, let's say in Facebook's world. When you visit Facebook properties, they know exactly who you are. But if you go to a website, let's say I go to a website connected to this ecosystem, I load CNN.com on my browser. When you go to CNN.com, a request will get made to our servers. And so we don't know exactly who you are. You're not logged in to any platform, but there's massive amounts of signals. So I would like to think we have to make a decision, but we're in this ecosystem. It's kind of like being in hard mode. Whereas a lot of these other platforms, such as Google and Facebook, they know exactly who you are. They have a lot of deterministic information to make a match. For us, we have a lot of disjointed information in the entire internet ecosystem, essentially. So that lends itself to a lot of interesting AI and machine learning problems. So for example, once we get a request to determine, well, should we show any products or content to this person? Maybe we need to look at, let's say, the IP address that this request originated from, and to look up where this user may be located, but also look at historical data to see, first of all, is this even a human, or did someone write a script to generate a lot of fake traffic, to my website, right? And so the very first usage of machine learning in this entire ecosystem end to end is fraud detection. Are these even human traffic? If you look at even internet usage online, it's more and more bots. Companies like OpenAI, all these different companies are trying to scrape the internet, try to get information. So you have to filter out a lot of traffic that may not even be legitimate. So that's number one. Number two, once you get the information, then you have to look up, well, what data do I have that could be relevant to this potential person? But you don't even know directly who this person may be. You have to connect it to data points that you may have gathered historically based on similar, signals or various identifiers that may exist in the ecosystem. You also have data that you can get directly from the advertiser or the brand that you work with. So we try to build as many connections as possible into the brand's what we call first-party data, such as data related to their CRMs or what products their customers may have purchased. So if we can get as many of these signals as possible, we can try to link it to the outside world. So we have signals from the customer, which is very powerful because these type of signals allow us to make content as personalized as possible rather than showing something static to all the potential users out there. We can show something a lot more relevant to them based on AI signals, based on content they've consumed recently, perhaps based on things that they may have bought recently. Again, a lot of probabilistic matching has to occur to even determine are these signals even theirs. And then throughout the rest of the process, we need to match to figure out what products to even show, which one, maybe based on something that they did recently. Like a classic example, if I left some stuff in my cart, I didn't finish the checkout in an e-commerce store, maybe you want to show those exact products to those users to remind them to finish the checkout. Or maybe you want to show something similar. Maybe they left that store on purpose. It wasn't exactly what they were looking for. Maybe you actually want to show something that's not identical, but something similar. So how do you determine that? There's a lot of unsolved problems and challenges in this ecosystem that I don't think anyone has solved. But I think it's a very interesting problem because at the end of the day, our goal is to help brands grow their business essentially and help customers also find things that are beneficial to them, that add a lot of value. If you didn't have a lot of these capabilities, research has shown that by default, people would be targeted more predatory type of products, especially related to health that could occur. And so there's a very fine balance when it comes to, if you can bring as much value to the consumer as possible.
I'm gonna ask you just two more clarifying questions, and then we'll start going around the table on a discussion. So the first question is, if you can just to describe for people who aren't familiar with the industry how you think about ROI. So in other words, that's a key part of your matching problem. Is you have thousands and thousands of advertisers on your platform, and when the opportunity to advertise on a CNN web page comes up, you are predicting what is the return on investment for all the different advertisers and who would benefit most from being there. And then the second thing is, and this is going to be very important once we start talking about how to make this more RLable, is the reward signal. And so I think in your industry, you have a concept of something like attribution, where when a person actually purchases something, that you try and assign kind of points to the different places where they might have been touched along the way with an advertisement that ultimately led to their decision to purchase that thing. So if you could just spend a moment to describe those 2 points, and then we'll get into our discussion.
Yeah, sounds good. So definitely the measurement problem and even understanding how much ROI I drove is a very difficult and challenging problem. I'd say not fully solved in the industry as well. So for example, let's say I saw and clicked on a promotion of a product. I go to that website and I come back later and then I actually buy that product. In theory, we would then assign what we call a conversion, and depending on the value of how much you bought, you will be able to calculate the ROI of how much money you spent trying to acquire these users versus how much revenue they generated. The challenges along the way, there's various signals that may get lost, and also competing platforms that may have also shown a similar product or message to this user. For example, what if I went away from my desktop device and went to my mobile and bought there, and connecting those signals, right? You could, connect someone based on the Wi-Fi, maybe the same Wi-Fi they're using. There's various other techniques as well. So there's a lot of probabilistic problems. And then let's say someone did buy something, but someone saw, let's say, promotions from Facebook, from connected TV, our platform, and let's say they use other platforms like Google search, ads and whatnot. Who actually gets the credit? Some marketers believe that, the last interaction should get the credit. Some marketers have a weighted average approach. And some marketers say, well, it's very hard to even connect the dots. And so we would use techniques called media mix modeling, where we look at the overall growth in revenue overall and try to connect the dots with how much money I actually invested and spent on various channels using various, decay formulas to really figure out correlation instead of causation. And then there's other strategies such as doing much more granular A/B testing, holdout groups to try to actually derive these causations more directly, which is also very expensive to run, because you have to stop, generating marketing in certain areas in order to figure that out. And the second part of your question in terms of assigning the score, yes. So as users conduct various actions that, may be relevant, we typically during the process, when I enter the bidding process and there's all these potential brands that may want to show me something, we want to show the most relevant brand and product to you. And so there's a relevancy score assigned to each user, relevant to each brand as well. So depending on this, first of all, it has to satisfy a certain threshold cutoff, right? We need to at least ensure that you're going to get positive ROI. So there's a minimum amount of score threshold that would need to satisfy. And then there's a competition process. Other brands are also trying to advertise to you. And we want to make sure that companies can maximize their return as much as possible. So we have to pick and choose internally as well on behalf of all our potential customers, the most relevant content to the right person as well.
Okay, so for all our listeners, when you are on when you're on a CNN website and you see an ad that you don't really necessarily think a lot about, that is the winner. That ad that you see is the winner of a competitive process that potentially thousands of Yang's customers have competed digitally to get that spot. And through a variety of wizardry, that particular ad has won the competition for that moment in time. Yang, the thesis, as you know, of this podcast is that we take an industry like this one, we get a sense of what you're doing, and then our job here is to talk about what does this look like at the limit. Mm-hmm. That as these, as machine intelligence advances, what does the end state or the directional towards an end state look like? And so we'll start with Niamh and work our way around, and then Yang, come back to you.
Sure. And if we use our kind of prior discussion as a segue, I think Yang, it sounds like you're already challenging day job. It's going to get perhaps even more tricky as shopping is starting to move from search-based to assistant-led. And so, again, on one side, it's beneficial because that tension of the past between automation or personalization now gets combined and you can get mass customization. But it does mean that we're moving from, a Google search bar whereby it generates click-through traffic from index links, still kind of a mechanistic path, to today or the future state whereby there's now an AI summary at the top that also reduces that propensity to click through. And eventually these in-chat summarizations and frankly opinions and judgments of a company's entire online footprint, which may or may not be accurate and that you have no visibility of, but generates kind of no traffic for you to then put your probabilistic ads on. And you can say in one sense, that's a different state and the two worlds will exist separately. But a lot of the companies who've caught on to this are now making their web pages LLM friendly. So exactly as you say, the OpenAI bots have gone from scraping to inference. So they're either creating concise text-based FAQ pages, the TLDR for bots and humans, but also replicating their web pages with very simple plain text markdowns by appending LLMS text to each web page, and you've got your plain text version, using things like citations, expert quotes, statistics, facts to kind of be deemed more trustworthy by the LLM. And in addition, it means that you have to update your bot and security protocols, your Cloudflare, to kind of go from preventing bots generating faux traffic to actually enabling it to become discoverable by agents. So I was just wondering, given that you spent the past decade in this pre-Gen AI world, which is already far too complex for that correlation versus causation, signal amongst the noise problem that you just stated, if we take it to the new limit, how do you kind of adapt in that new space?
Let me pause Yang responding so we can just go around and get comments from everybody. And I should have by the way pointed out that this is a very successful company. That it's one of Canada's fastest growing technology companies. They're doing hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, and with a very significant growth rate and high profit margins and all the things that would be attractive in this market. They have a lot of customers from around the world, but predominantly, I think U.S. is their largest market by a wide margin. Their rate of innovation has also been significant. So, Sendhil, on your side, at the limit, this matching problem, what are you imagining?
Yeah, so I guess I had a couple of questions. So one question I had was, it feels like one can view these predictions as sort of where to place ads and to improve that. A different way we could view it is to ask, what is the knowledge embodied in that prediction? And are there other implications of that knowledge beyond that? So as just a very trivial thought experiment, imagine you ask the executives to make the predictions themselves, and imagine they were particularly poor at it. And if they were particularly poor at it relative to your predictions, it suggests there are things the executives are failing to understand about their product, about their customer base, about something that is embodied here. But given that executives make many other decisions on their own about the product, for example, the design of the ad itself is a thing that was designed by the executive based on those presumptions. If they have failed to understand something, it means that there are problems in many other parts of the production chain. So I guess one question I would ask is, how can we surface that information? Is there a way of surfacing it? Are there critical decisions? Are there automatic ways of surfacing it? Because it seems, given how much is spent on marketing dollars and how much is spent on product design, that would strike me as kind of an interesting thing. The second thing it goes back to your question of attribution, which is, this is a place where in the limit is a little hard for me to think about, because there's two kinds of limits we could have in mind. A sort of computational limit, a data limit, algorithms getting better limit. A different limit is one in which we get rid of what I think of as the biggest bottleneck right now, which is the lack of a good counterfactual, which is what you also alluded to in the attribution problem. Like the attribution problem comes from us not being the ad choice itself, not having been part of the optimization pipeline, where if it were, one thing we would do is to create the right counterfactuals to be able to assess here versus there. Eventually, maybe we'll do that. But it seems to me that's a big divide, because if I were just to think of my own experience with advertising, one thing that strikes me is how many things I'm advertised that I've already bought. How many things I'm advertised that I'm going to buy irrespective of this ad. And those are all, I think, coming from this counterfactual problem to some degree. The counterfactual problem, I think, is not a small problem in the advertising world, as you well know. So I'm more just sort of trying to prod you on that problem as it's highlighted. The attribution is part of it, but it feels like there's a bigger space. And it feels like if we could nail that counterfactual problem, I think it would really increase the return to advertising, because we know that it was efficacious and could focus it.
For our listeners, I think this is really a very, very important point here, which is that, when Yang talked about several million decisions a second, it directs our attention to the fact that the AIs can just make decisions much faster than people. But Sendhil wasn't talking about the speed. He was talking about, his thought experiment was, imagine that the person and the AI had as much time as they want to think in terms of predicting, for example, out of these 100 people, which are the most likely to buy this product, or which are the most likely to be influenced by this advertisement to buy a product. And what Sendhil's making the argument is, if you strip away the time component, it still might be the case that the AI is better at predicting what the consumer will do than the executive that's being paid, $2 million a year or whatever. And then what Sendhil's saying is, what do they know about this product that the executive doesn't know? Like, they know something about the product customer pair that the executive doesn't know. And wouldn't it be useful to figure out what it is that they know that the executive doesn't know? Because maybe what they know is not applicable only to this advertising problem, but it may be valuable to all kinds of problems inside the organization that this $2 million a year person is making decisions on, with a less informed view than is that, Sendhil, have I captured that? We'll come back to that for you, Yang, to comment on. And then his second point on counterfactuals, like he used the word counterfactuals, and I just want to make sure our listeners follow, because this is a term that we use a lot in economics. And so a counterfactual here is, if you show an advertisement to somebody and they later go buy the product, I think what Sendhil was getting at is, what's the counterfactual? In other words, if they hadn't been shown the advertisement, would they have still bought the product? And the reason for the counterfactual is he's trying to get a clearer picture, I think, of the causal relationship. So that was really just clarification. Let's turn to Rich, and then we'll let Yang react to any of the points that he's heard.
Ajay, I really like the way you introduced this challenge in terms as a matching challenge. Yeah, that's essentially what we're dealing with. And yet, when I think of advertising, it doesn't feel like a matching challenge. It seems like it's very one-sided. There's the company that's trying to push onto me and other customers their product, because they're just trying to sell their product. They don't care if they waste my time. I feel that that's the way advertising traditionally has been. And if it's really matching, it shouldn't be like that. We're talking about to the limit. And I think in the limit, well, maybe it could be much more of matching, maybe much more like pull. Some people, not myself, but many people like to go shopping. It's almost like entertainment for them. They go out and they encounter things, and that's interesting to them. And that makes sense to me, that I would put aside a portion of my time and say, well, let's see if there's some interesting things that I might want to buy. If I could had an opportunity to do that, and there were good things offered to me, I would invest time in doing that. Otherwise, I just don't like shopping because it's a waste of time and it's a hard work and it's not very. I rarely find something new that I would like to use. Instead, I find new things that I want to buy from my friends. Like my friend says, "Oh, I just bought a Tesla or a sleep aid or a new kind of shirt to wear." That's from a good source. I hear things. I can imagine that if I had an assistant, as Niamh was saying, that more assistant based, someone who knows me and will offer me things that I might like. That this would be this is where it's hard for me to offer, but just naively, I'm thinking this is the limit. And the limit, an AI that knows me will be saying, "Oh, hey, Rich, I found this new thing that, knowing you and your habits and your resources, or you might be interested in buying this." And that agent would be very sensitive to, well, I say, "No, I already have one of those. Come on." Or "No, that just pisses me off." And it'd be very sensitive. And then every once in a while I will buy something and that's the way it should be. It should be customized and it should be an activity that, even if I don't buy it, I was interested to hear about it. And then it could be very RLable because it would be like, it's trying to keep me happy and it's trying to get me to buy things every once in a while. Now, how would this be a business? Well, your business is all based on the customer being the company that's going to kind of push their product. But what if alternatively, your company could be based on the person who's going to buy it and you want to make them be happy. And you don't care really if I buy the Tesla or if I buy the Hyundai, you want to sell me something. You want to find the match between me and some company. And once I say yes, your company will get a bonus for connecting me to Hyundai, say, because even though you didn't have a contract with Hyundai, you would have some sort of agreement that says if I bring you customers that for which are suited to your product and want to buy it, that you as the middleman would get some reward. Okay, so what do you think about this sort of middleman focused or customer focused way of doing advertising it seems like we ought to at least be moving directionally. That's the direction that we want to move to if we want to move to the limit of matching customers to producers of products.
In the spirit of your new paper, An Age of Experience, that in that setting, you've described an agent, and that agent is getting experience by interacting with you, and it gets its signals from you. And those, even though they are human data, those are grounded because you are giving them the agent your preferences, and you're telling them some things that you like. Yes, I do want to buy that thing that you're suggesting. And then other things you're saying, you should know I already have that, or you should know I don't like those things, or you should know I can't afford that. That agent that's shopping on your behalf is able to do a much more exhaustive search than a human would be able to do. So Yang, there's a lot on the table here. You don't have to respond to everything. You can just pick and choose whatever you like to respond to.
Yeah, no, this was excellent. Thank you everyone for all the commentary ideas. It was great. I think the interesting thing is I do find all the responses actually interconnected. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the end of what Rich talked about, circle to Niamh, and then go back to Sendhil and back to Rich. So I think it's actually very correlated everything, which is what I find it very interesting. So I guess I'll start by saying, yes, the ultimate goal of what we want to do is to be actually consumer focused. At the peak, if you satisfy the customer, you satisfy the businesses, right? And I think obviously there's a lot of challenges to that, and I'll talk about that a bit later, especially with human conflicts of interest, also going back to the counterfactual problem. But before we get there, I'd say I think the positive end with the rise of AI agents now, being able to push more things to users on behalf of the customer, knowing what they like, I think that will help us move more towards that direction. And I think us as an industry as a whole in marketing and advertising, we're typically not really worried about which channels come and go. Because let's say everyone starts to use AI agents. Well, at scale, typically, industries at some point, at the end of the day, a new channel at some point will have some sort of monetization necessity just to be able to pay for things. even right now, the marketing advertising industry is pretty diversified in terms of channels. The example I talked about in terms of like browsing publisher websites in your browser, just one example. We have the app environment, we have the connected TV environment. Now we have digital billboards, we have audio, and now going into like email marketing, SMS, even mail. Physical mail is done programmatically now. So the concept of what we call this industry digital advertising is really just the digital buying and selling of transaction of a marketing message, which could apply to any type of channel, even an AI-driven one. Whether or not that's probably going to be more push-based rather than pull-based. Maybe the timing is pull-based, but like in terms of knowing what you need to show, is going to be more push-based, which aligns with more of the marketing type of paradigm. But regardless, because these are just electronic transactions buy and sell, I think the industry has always evolved as new platforms come to scale, new technologies come to scale, they kind of get integrated with this ecosystem. So I think that's likely what we're going to see, is that natural transition into that. So I guess going into what we talked about, executive decisions, I find that executives tend to make pretty high level, static based decisions on, let's do a deal at this, a promotional event right now, or these are the types of products we're going to sell. I think what executives aren't able to do is personalize to the right people. So if I have an array of a catalog of things, they're not really able to customize it in real time to the right party and whatnot. And that's where brands and platforms like us, the most important role right now is understanding what's unique about your brand and your individual users. It's not a 1 and 0 thing in terms of understanding things about your brand, but really being able to look at all the events that occur with different types of customers across different geolocations, understand the different variations, and so that you can slice and dice these and essentially like perfect the matching problem, so to speak. And it also ties into creatives, even like the ad creative one with generative AI, it's getting a lot more personalized. So even a lot of what we're investing in is being able to auto-generate videos on behalf of the brand, adding motion to them from a static product. Like you have static product images on an e-commerce store. We're looking at how do we take these images, add motion to them, create a full-blown video. And when you watch your TV, you're used to seeing a static message, but imagine they were fully variable and customized based on different permutations of a person's essentially profile and whatnot. So I'd say unsolved problem fully yet, but a lot of different with more and more data with generative AI, it's all moving towards that direction. I think the challenge is when it comes to what they have bought anyway, that's a huge problem when it comes to attribution as well. That's why there's a lot of measurements platforms that try to offer what we call incremental measurement to figure out like what's the actual incremental lift and incremental revenue and that would have happened. The challenge I'd say is that you'd be surprised of how many marketers don't leverage it as much, and they're still focused on like the most short-term last interaction, which is obviously more correlated rather than an actual causation. And that's because I still find there's a lot of human conflicts of interest, which means that, let's say an executive is obsessed with this legacy metric of like the last interaction with a specific channel, their team members are going to not care about all these other metrics that may have been more truthful. They're going to optimize towards the metric that people are used to, and it starts to game the system. And so everyone just tries to game a metric, and they're not actually caring about what actually happened. Because going back to Rich's point, if something is truly interesting that people want to buy, I think from what we've seen, it still takes some time for that to synthesize. You may want to see it a couple number of times. You want to think about it, and then you're going to go buy that, right? So there's a natural time delay to that, but it also conflicts with immediate gratification, which is so baked into human nature. And because there's a matching problem as time goes on, it gets harder to correlate the patterns because, identities change, devices change, all these things change over time. So the connections get looser, even though the actual truth of these, being able to educate someone on something that could be useful for them is actually going to take time, but human conflicts of interest, kind of pushes against that because everyone wants immediate results. So going back to everything, I think obviously that's why I said it's an unsolved problem. There's a lot of different conflicting forces at play. I do think over time, as things get more intelligent, we will gradually get better at solving this problem, especially as, what we try to do as a company, we try to expand what we do into like being more responsible for the company's creatives as well, rather than letting companies do that in a static fashion. So the more we can understand about the business, the more we can understand the patterns, the more we can customize, and we use our advantage of scale and reach to really, take as much advantage of it as possible to help drive these behaviors that, these brands are ultimately needing, as well as the consumer.
Yang, thank you very much. We just have a few minutes left, and so we're going to do a quick round robin here. And the thing we'll focus on is, imagine for investors, and this is not specific to Yang's company, this is just regarding the industry overall. If there was sort of, one thing that investors should pay attention to in terms of the evolution of this industry, what is the technological advance or the capability that when this happens, that it'll have a meaningful effect on the distribution of profits in the industry. And you can take that, in any direction you like, but just one thing in terms of the direction of taking this to the limit. What do you think is a significant milestone in the shift forward? And so, Niamh, we'll start with you.
Sure.
And then Rich, and then Sendhil.
I think it is this democratization of a personal shopping assistant, that we are moving to a world where you have mass personalization, this individual agent that gets to know your tastes and operate on your behalf. And this isn't fanciful. It's already happening today, in the sense of Amazon now has its shopping assistant in there where you interact in it with an LLM and it goes and sources products for you. Also, a lot of the clothes brands like H&M and that are creating digital avatars, not just of the models, but of you, so you can try on the clothes interactively and see how it looks. So I think that's kind of a key shift with the Gen AI jump.
Thanks, Niamh. Rich, on your side?
I think I'm going to say the same thing. The personalization by using AI can go much more further in doing that. And there are steps that happen now. Like when I shop on Amazon, I find myself very influenced by when it says, Amazon's choice or Amazon's recommendation, because I don't want to look through a million choices. I want one that's a good trade-off of quality and price. And I've come to feel that Amazon makes reasonable choices for me. And that's key. It's not like, they're trying to push something on me. And they're, the trust is so essential. And the trust that we don't have with push advertising. I remember when I grew up, of course, every TV show is full with advertisements. Now, when Amazon Prime or Stack TV puts an advertisement on TV, it's like really jarring, and I just get pissed off. I think, well, maybe I won't watch this show because this show has ads on it and others don't. And I think feel more and more we're more impatient with our advertising and the personalization and the quality of the advertising is so important. And when an agent can do that for us, they absolutely have to be sensitive to consequences of the recommendations. Because if there's a personal assistant who's not giving me what I need, I'm going to switch to another one or just not shop.
Thanks, Rich. And Sendhil, last comment's yours.
I'm going to build on Rich's, not this point, the previous one, basically. I think as he was saying, if we go back to the idea that advertising is a two-sided market, it feels like the change that would totally disrupt this market completely and that would obviate the need for it entirely is right now the only reason we have advertising is because I, as a person, find it hard to sift through everything. And really, advertising is a saving of sifting costs. And so to me, however we think about it, agents, ultimately, even a reasonable fidelity algorithm will basically change sifting cost structure. and it is going to be utterly disruptive no matter what. The second thing that's worth noting is that the current click-through rates of ads are pretty low, which means that an agent doesn't need to be very good to be better than that targeting model. Because our best prediction is only at, call it 10, I'll be very generous, 10%, the best. So that means an agent that has only got 10% fidelity of whether I'm going to like something is already going to be very disruptive to this market. So I think people have not calibrated fully how disruptive agents will be in this market.
Excellent. All right. Well, Yang, thank you very much. First off, congratulations on the success of the business. And thanks for taking the time to speak with us. And Niamh and Sendhil and Rich, thank you for your thoughts and interest in digging into StackAdapt.
Thank you both. Thank you all.
And that's our show for today. Thanks to Yang from StackAdapt and my colleagues Rich, Sendhil, and Niamh. Follow us on the Intrepid Substack at insights.intrepidgp.com and subscribe on your favorite platform. That includes YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and others. Thanks everyone for listening.
The views, opinions, and information expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Intrepid Growth Partners. This content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as financial, investment, or legal advice.